tennis tournament is next week. You better be working on your backhand.
I'm sorry, but I have my orders. Stand aside or prepare to fight.
I already told you, Joey! The Kaibatron has access to every card in the deck! It's part of my job to keep an eye on you, Huntress. You can lecture me later. Right now, I need your help and I don't have any time.
But I didn't come here to talk. I came here to watch you die.
In exchange for information on the car, I have to date you. How about I shoot one of these through your right kneecap and you tell me what I need to know in loud, screechy tones?
Oh, now, dear, where's the rush? Stay a bit longer. I'll bake your favorite, banana cream pie!
Oh, I see you decided to come to dinner in costume. How quaint.
I think we should get her donuts for her birthday. All humans love donuts.
Welcome to the show!
Yes, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you. We one of my favorite things to do is to interview voice actors because I listen to your voices so much. It's just awesome to connect people to the voice that I hear, and I always learn so much. So yes.
Oh, yay! Well, no pressure, right? No pressure.
No, none at all. None at all. So, we've talked about you a little bit before you got on, talking about, how you started in 4Kids. You've been in shows like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! You've been in games like Red Dead Redemption. And in the show Fringe, which is another big thing. And we were just talking just a second ago about how you were a voice in Star Wars Battlefront, or as it says, female rebel. And, right now, even though when this is going to air on Christmas, but right now everyone is crazy for Star Wars, especially female rebels. So just first question, how excited are you for a little indie film known as Rogue One, which is in theaters right now?
Yes. It opens, I think, like today, right?
Yeah, at like 7 o'clock, though some of the world's already seen it. And of course, in your area, they probably had pre-screenings a long time ago.
I happen to have seen a screening of it last night, in fact.
Oh. Ooh.
Yes. So no spoilers, but this will be by Christmas, so everyone will probably have seen it by then, but still no spoilers. But I was just like ecstatic. The funny thing was I actually didn't know that the game was a Star Wars game because they were really keeping it under wraps that they were doing a Star Wars version of that already successful platform game. And what happened was I auditioned for it under one name. And then when I booked it under another name. And then when I went in there, it was like recording at a studio that had, it was like a smaller studio that only had 2 rooms and the other room was empty. Like the whole thing was very quiet, And so I went in there and I was like, what is this? And then I get into the booth and the director gets on the line because he was Oakland or something. So the creators from international, someone's online internationally from one part of the project, and then the director's like on another part. And sorry, I got to stack. I just got to this story is terrible. I'm going to go back to the beginning and start it because I was picking up dog poop while trying to tell it at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to start again, and you can edit it.
Yes.
So I'm like, I'm a mess right now. Okay, so Star Wars Battlefront was awesome to work on. It was super, super hush hush because they wanted to keep quiet that they were doing a Star Wars version of an already very popular game. And when I auditioned for it, it was one code name. And then when I booked it, it was another code name. And then when I showed up, there was 2 studios. The other studio was empty. And everyone was like online. So I didn't meet anyone because they were all just like being Skyped in. And so I went into the room and I put on the headphones and the director says, hi, welcome. We're chatting. He goes, so do you know what you're here for? And I said, no, but I see the word stormtrooper on the script. And he was like, yeah, that's right. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I am sitting there just trying to I was like, okay, Carrie, do not freak out. Like they're not here. You can't see them. So just make your voice sound totally normal. Like you're not totally freaking out. Like the 8-year-old girl inside of you is like doing, be cool, sound cool. I straight up cried. I was like, be cool. And then I saw the line, and then we're like going through and I'm recording stuff. And then I saw the line, Red Leader standing by. And I just looking at it on the script, I just burst into tears. And I was like, okay. And then the engineer, I just look at the engineer through the glass, and he leans forward and hits the talkback and says, yeah, a lot of people have been doing that. So I was like, oh my God. So I was kind of losing my mind a little bit and then of course I had to wait 10 months before it came out, and I couldn't tell anyone. I called my agent when I left because she's the only one who's also legally bound not to say anything because she's my agent. So I was like, you're the only person I can tell about this. But it was Star Wars and blah, 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 blah. And she called me back. She's like, yeah, she goes, I was sort of thinking it might have been something like that. So it's just so exciting to be a part of. Anytime you can step into a legacy show or anything that's a part of your history, your childhood, is such an incredible moment for you. They're just fantastic shows to be a part of. The fact that I got to be in my own way a part of the Star Wars universe is like spectacular.
So, what was it like playing a rebel in Star Wars Battlefront, and then watching a movie that is very much in that vein, the Star Wars Battlefront vein, but on the big screen?
It's so funny because there were certain parts of watching the movie that I was like, oh my gosh, this is so like a video game segment. This is so a video game segment. You could play through this. You could play through this. And so I don't know if it's because I'm in the video game mindset that I watch movies and think that way, or if movies are being designed more that way. I don't know. I just don't remember as a kid watching Indiana Jones and thinking, this would be a great video game, level. And yet I'm sitting there watching the movie last night being like, this would be a great video game level. So I don't know if that's like just me putting it on there. But it was so cool. It was so cool. The movie's just fabulous and delightful, and I was like losing my mind watching it last night on several occasions. So it was great. And I really do love that there's more. I really do love that there's more women being represented in the movies and in roles that have more active agency and emotional depth that doesn't have to do with them having a romantic relationship with a man, and that's just fabulous to see.
Fantastic.
So it's an exciting time.
It is a very exciting time.
Yeah.
Star Wars is run by, a female CEO with Kathleen Kennedy. You have all these new female stars. You have more than one female character per saga, which is nice.
God forbid, 2 vaginas on screen.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Yeah. Too many vaginas on the screen. You've got to be careful. It might affect that blockbuster movie number.
Yeah, it's not even Jennifer Lawrence. So.
I know. What's hard is like sometimes when there's 2 vaginas on screen at the same time, you can barely even tell them apart because it's like so many women,
Oh,
You're
yeah.
like,
Though
thank God one's a redhead and one's a brunette. God forbid we might get confused. So step by step, right?
So I will say this: the 3 main women they've cast, one in the Han Solo movie, one in Rogue One, and one in Force Awakens. They're all very similar in type, though, which is kind of
it is. I noticed that too. I was like, wow, these feel like the same, but
short
they're all
brown-haired English woman.
Yeah, but they're all fabulous, so I'm not going to complain. So
I'm not complaining about Felicity Jones or the Mother of Dragons.
Right?
But so I was just saying, you talked about the secrecy that you were in with Star Wars Battlefront, and coming in and not knowing what it was. Could we compare that with another big game which you were involved with, like Red Dead Redemption, which was another very big game, very expensive, and they tried keeping it very secret for a time. But what was the difference working on a game like that as opposed to Star Wars Battlefront?
Well, it's interesting because I think because the production lens is so long for all these video games, in terms of like from the time they record it to the time it actually gets released, that you can understand why they would have such a need for secrecy, because I record my stuff like 10 months before the stuff, before it gets announced. So, but yet people always seem to be able to find stuff out. I don't know how they do it. Even when I was redoing, when Lux was getting her Elementalist skin that just came out, months, like when I was recording it, like 2 months ago, someone like leaked some information or something, was like, I think they're doing something with Lux. And I was like, how do they know? How do people find out this stuff? It's crazy.
Black magic.
So I know, it's nuts. But yeah, so I think with Red Dead Redemption, I think it was actually because for that particular game and it was like the sequel, and Annie was sort of part of the downloadable content. She wasn't like a core part of the game. She was recorded a little bit later, so the time between recording her and having it released was shorter for me. But I also, and it was great to like revisit her, and it was super fun. But I think that there was just something for me different about Star Wars, because I could not wait to tell my brother. You know, we grew up together playing Star Wars, and it was such a huge part of my childhood and our childhood together that it really killed me to not be able to tell him. And I literally waited until 9 a.m. East Coast time when it got released, the day it dropped, to be like, to call him up immediately and be like, oh my God, I'm in the game! You know what I mean? So I think that was the harder part. Like having to keep it from my brother for 10 months was definitely harder for me on Star Wars than it was for anything else. Keeping anything else quiet in general from like the public or from fans is like one thing, but having to keep quiet about being in a Star Wars game from my brother for 10 months was super, super painful.
And being, the type of game it was, where it doesn't really have a single player thing to, promote and advertise a story, they kept most of the voice cast under wraps the entire time. Unlike like in the new Call of Duty, like we knew Kit Harington was in there when they showed the trailer. So like, oh, that's Kit Harington. He's clearly the bad guy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it's amazing how like you'll still be under your NDA, right? But they'll release a trailer for a game, and then immediately on Twitter, people are like, "Is that your voice? Is that your whatever?" And me and our other voiceover friends are always like, "I mean, they figured it out." Like, I don't know how people are able to spot everything so easily, but I mean, some people, I guess you just, I don't know. But it's so funny because you're like, I can neither confirm nor deny said rumor. Even though like clearly your voice is like already out there, it's been released. You're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Blah, 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 blah. La, 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 la. What trailer?
Well, and then sometimes you have it where I think it was Kingdoms of Amalur, where the trailer had Claudia Black as the main female, but the game had a totally different actress as the main female in the game.
Oh.
And so people, because the trailer came out well in advance, and I don't know, they just had to record stuff for, the voiceover for the introduction. And so that changed by then, and people were really confused because they do have very similar voices. I believe Abby Craden was the final voice, but they had Claudia Black do it in the first trailer, and it just threw people off for quite a while.
That's smart. I feel like if you were a company, it would be smart. It's like a good idea, right? To be like, we're just going to cast for the promo and then use someone else. And I know I've auditioned for promos for games where I'm reading one of the main characters for the game, but I definitely wasn't in the game. You know what I mean? So I feel like, yeah, sneak attack, surprise the fans.
And that's one smart thing that studio did. Is this too bad 38 Studio died like right after the game came out, because they did everything else wrong. But so you're talking about how this. One thing that fascinates me is you do a lot of anime and a lot of video games. And video games, some American TV shows have a lot of time between recording and people see stuff. But when it comes to anime, since it's dubbed, like for example, earlier this year we had Kylie Bear on, and they just announced that he's he's part of the voice cast for the dubbing of Dragon Ball Super, and it comes out next month. He's the voice cast. It's coming out next month. So with anime, the turnaround seems to be very quickly. Like you record it and it comes out really soon. Does it seem is it a lot harder to do a video game where you can't talk about things for so long, as opposed to anime where like, here it is, done?
Well, actually, and that's the perception, but there's plenty of shows that I've worked on where they don't get announced for 6 months. So 4 months, 3 months, 6 months. I think it's just really the big thing has to do with the production lens. Yes, when you're doing the dub for something, because in order to do the dub, you have to have the materials further developed so that the time is shorter than in a video game when you're recording those assets earlier in the process and they're kind of like building it all together. So it makes it longer, a longer wait on a video game. But like, I mean, we don't record and announce as quickly as you think usually. Like Dragon Ball Z might have had like a much shorter one, though I can't remember when they were recording that, but it was definitely a short turnaround. But I mean, for a lot of stuff, I record something and they don't announce the cast until, 3 months away. But sometimes for anime, especially for bigger projects in anime, that is because they'll wait to do it at a convention. They'll wait till like New York Comic Con or like Vegas or Otakon. Like they'll wait for like a bigger event in order to do like a big event around the announcement sometimes. So sometimes that's like why they push it or whatnot.
That makes sense.
But honestly, at this point, it's such a part of the job that it's almost like I record something and I walk away and I forget about it. It's not like, because I'm like, in the 10 months it's taken, I've been working on other things. So like by the time, like, it's not like I only recorded that one game and I sat and did nothing for the rest of my year, but wait for that game to come out. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, you just are sort of like, okay, you go in, you record and you forget about it. You let it go. You don't sit on it. You don't like, there's nothing, you don't sit there and like, you're not like marking on your wall, like the countdown until the announcement necessarily.
Unless it's Star Wars, and then you're counting down.
Unless it's Star Wars, but that was only because of my brother. It really killed me to not be able to tell him.
So Zach, you have a question, yes?
Yeah, I was really curious about when you were actually in the booth, finding out where you were. How did you ultimately like steady yourself and get to the point where you could do it?
Oh, for Star Wars specifically?
Yeah.
Oh, I would just have to like take like a couple of breaths before. I mean, because it happened many times. I was like, oh my god, okay, and you just pull it together and you just do it. That just comes from acting, man. Any kind of acting, especially stage acting, any kind of acting, you got to be able to just get on what you got to get on for the character and the moment, and just like let go of the rest of your life. Because in any given moment in the booth, you're in the booth, on stage, on film, on set, wherever, whatever you're doing, you have your whole life that is Carrie Keranen unfolding, and you gotta, as soon as action happens, you gotta be, whoever that character is in their circumstances. So you kind of get used to sort of being able to live two separate lives and or take what's happening in the life that is Carrie Keranen and funnel it into the work in helpful ways if it's easy to, access and can assist you in that moment. I mean, but that's just like straight up acting. Like that's just what you just learn to do that. You learn to manage that just by doing the work, It's like that Malcolm Gladwell's book about 10,000 hours. Like you just have enough time in the booth. You just have enough time on set. You just start to get enough time on stage where you just know how to be like, okay, I had a really bad day, or I just got some really bad news, or I am really tired, or I am, fill in the blank for whatever is going on in your life. And yet I'm here to blank. And you just learn to manage it in a way that then becomes like not even conscious. Like you don't even consciously do it. It's not something that I had to like stop and think about and be like, oh, I need a minute or anything like that. It's just like, you just go like, how to be like, cut that shit out. Working now. And then the take is over and then you're back into your life. You're like, cut that shit out. Do your take. All right. Now you're back into your life. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just like a thing that you just learn to do without even thinking, Because your life continues, you know what I mean? Like you can't live inside the world of your work.
And especially when you're doing voice acting, like there's so many chances to do something that you're a fan of, especially if you're a mega fan of all these things. And if you had a fanboy or fangirl moment every time you did something like that one, you'd probably not get more work.
Well, I don't know if that's the case. I mean, I think that if you let your emotions get in the way of your work, I think you'll have trouble. And whether it's the fact that you're fangirling over the work or whether you're just letting the emotions of your life, whatever it is, like if you let it get in the way of your work is going to suffer. And I think that's true for any job though. If you're working at a store and you're having a bad day and you're kind of a dick to all your customers, like that's going to be a problem for you on the job, right? Or whatever. So I think it's just, I don't know that it's totally different just because you're in the arts. I think we all have to find ways to manage our personal life as we like engage out in the world. But I think there's also time for that. I think that I've been a fan of a lot of things that I've done, I've been on and stuff. And a lot of times the client can definitely appreciate that you're enthusiastic about the project. I love when the director is enthusiastic about the project. When I come into something and if they're like, oh yeah, it's this thing and that's, and you're a princess and do this and blah, blah, blah. Okay, good. You know, I'm just like, that's not as interesting to me to work on because I feel like I'm not able to bring my ideas and my enthusiasm. You know, if you're not bringing your ideas and enthusiasm, or you don't want my ideas and my enthusiasm, I'm kind of like, well, now why are we here? So I think there is a certain amount of enthusiasm that, you know, should be there for the project and what you're working on. And you hope that everyone in the room feels the same way about it as you do. Because that's the better situation than people being like, yeah, they're just punching a clock or whatever. That's not the ideal situation for me. So it's not really an issue. I think that it's, I don't know. I think also the way that you manage yourself and you manage your emotions, are different. Like when you make your emotional state a problem for the people around you, then that's a hard thing to deal with and navigate, and you might not be asked back. And when you just have, you know what I mean? Like if you just are having emotions about something, like that's fine. That's acceptable, you know?
The very first show that it says, well, at least according to your wiki, it says that you tried out for was with 4Kids and with Pokemon, and this was after Pokemon had already been established. So why don't you tell us about your very first big audition for, I believe it was 4Kids with Pokemon?
Okay, so actually, I don't know what Wikipedia says, and other people write that, not me. So take it all with a grain of salt. Actually, my first job was not with 4Kids, and my first job with 4Kids was not on Pokemon. So my very first anime audition was for Berserk with NYAV Post, with Michael Nicholas at NYAV Post. And then after booking that job and being a part of that and kind of working and learning the technique and stuff, then I started to get introduced to more studios and more directors and stuff. And so it's really a very, because of the technical aspect of dubbing specifically, there is this kind of community of people who know how to do that technique, can do it in the time you need it to be done to stay on production, and are good actors and lovely people to work with. So there is a lot of referral that happens inside that community based on those. So once I started to kind of produce at the correct rate and get a sense of what that technique was, then I started working at different studios. And I think my first audition at 4Kids actually was for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I did not book, but the very lovely and talented Veronica Taylor did. I just adore her so much, and had a chance to work with her on many projects over the time I was in New York, and she's just a lovely, lovely, lovely woman. And then I don't even know if I auditioned for Pokemon, because in Pokemon, I actually played a lot of guest stars, and you don't always have time to audition for guest stars, especially in a show like that where it's recording each show, like it's doing a show a week. If you're doing a dub that's going to be released in volumes, then you usually have a little bit more time to do your guest stars, because you basically have like 6 weeks to do the whole project. So you have a little bit more time to audition and build that in. But when you like have to record it every week, you don't necessarily have time to take production time out of your week to audition everybody. So a lot of the guest stars that I did on Pokemon were me just being called and saying, hey, can you come in? We have a role for you. Once the directors kind of know you and know your voice and know your range, they just sort of start calling you up for those kinds of jobs. The one big role that I auditioned for and booked with 4Kids was when I took over Mokuba, because Tara was moving to Los Angeles, and they were looking for a voice match for him. And so I came in, and I'd already worked with Eric Stewart previously, and I'd done some other shows. So they knew me at the company, but they didn't know me to do a boy. So I auditioned for it, and Eric really, really, really went to bat for me and said, this is the person I want. And they were nervous. They were like, well, she's never done a boy before. It's a lead and we're nervous. And he was like, nope, she's the one I want. That's it. Cast her. And they were like, all right. It's your funeral, basically, was kind of their attitude on it. And it ended up working out. But during that audition, after I came out of the booth, I was like, if you're still seeing people, I think I have someone who would be great. She might sound a lot like this. And I was totally pitching a friend of mine for the role. And he's like standing there staring at me. And in his own mind, he's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're the role. And I'm standing there trying to pitch somebody else because I was like, I'm never going to get this role. I've got the perfect girl for you. He's like, you're the girl for me. So that was sort of a funny little moment. But that was my most interesting, like, for kids related story was that. And then, but there were other things that I auditioned for, like, other things I did in like Yu-Gi-Oh! In the spin-offs for Yu-Gi-Oh! And whatnot. And, Pat and Stan, Dinosaur Kings. But so you end up having this mix of like things you audition for because the parent company wants approval on the voices, and then things that you just get cast in because they don't need approval. So, and sometimes it's faster to just cast people that which is why it's so key. I've been really lucky that when I've been introduced to a new studio, I've often booked the first thing, some part in the first thing that I read for them. Nice. So that way, like, I have an opportunity to build a relationship, and then and then they're like, oh, I like this person and she's talented and she's good and we like working with her and we like having her around, and they get to know you and your voice better, faster. And then you can start to be on the docket as a potentiality for these other roles that don't get auditioned for, or some companies will take auditions you've submitted or samples of roles you've done with them and submit them to the client and say, this is who we're thinking of using. And the client will just approve you based on voice samples from something else. It works same with a demo. Sometimes they're like, hey, here's the demo of the person we want to work with. And they're like, yeah. Okay, perfect. Great. So like, that's the kind of way that like work begets work, and you start to, again, your reputation. So a lot of it is like making sure that when you get those opportunities, you're ready, how to come in and deliver the acting, not just like, oh, I can do a funny voice, but like the character and the character idea, and be able to like be professional and that, be professional and be awesome in that moment. And it's tough because at first it's a lot of pressure, Well, at first maybe there's not pressure. At first maybe you're just like super excited to be there and you're like, blah, 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 blah. And then once you start to become aware of the pressure, then you're like, oh God. And then you go through a phase where you're like, oh, it's cool. You know what? Whatever. It's fine. But, and you're like, so there's like different stages of like mental, like mental paradigms that you're in as the auditioner.
That makes sense.
I forgot what the question was. I've just been talking.
You answered it well. You gave us lots of great stories, which is really what we like. But I'm just wondering, especially early on with anime, you went from Berserk to Pokemon, and Berserk is a very different show than Pokemon. A lot more violent and mature.
Yeah, really? A little.
Just a little.
Just a little.
Did early on in your career doing this stuff, was there ever any like whiplash with, when you go from a very adult show like Berserk to a very kid show like Pokemon, and, just switching back and forth to different styles of anime?
I think that was the thing that really made me fall in love with anime, is that inside the genre of anime, it can hold so many modes and methods of storytelling. It can have like the cute little kids shows. It can have magical girl shows. It can have Berserk. It can have, Cowboy Bebop. Like, you can have all these different styles, and, Fate Zero. And so there's something really like beautiful about that. And it's also great to be able to come in and access different parts of you and your performance. It's like, you get to, instead of just doing the same thing every day, like, this is for kids age 10, you get to sort of live in these different worlds and perform in different ways. So I love the variety. And I think the variety is what helps keep it fresh, and also helps you continue to grow as an artist, to get challenged in these different ways. Like, okay, how do I fit into this? How does like my character fit into this world? Because there's been 2 shows where I've done recently where I had a very dramatic character with a dramatic storyline inside of a comedy. And then I've had a very kind of comedic character with sort of a weird eccentricness about her in a very serious drama, you know, like, and so you're like, ooh, how do I do that? You know? And so there's, and it's really the challenges of how to capture this and be true to the essence of the character and the idea of the piece, but also deliver the fullness of the potential of that character inside of that piece. And it's such a fun thing. And it's a great way to collaborate with the director in those moments of like, okay, well, now that she's approached this moment, like something as simple as like Satsuki in Kill la Kill, you know, post episode 17, like there's a big change that happens after the twist comes. And then there's a moment like late in the series, I don't know if it was like episode 19, 20, something like that, where she laughs. There's a cue where she's laughing. And I'm like, I've been playing this character for 10 months. She's never laughed once. I'm like, whoa, how does she laugh? What does she sound like when she laughs? What is that for her? You know? So even sometimes within a show, you'll have like a shift in your character and you're like, ooh, how does this person that I've grown to know and be and experience and come from their point of view, now something has happened that's changed them. They're growing as a person inside this story, and how do I grow with them, you know? And those are sort of the beauty of it, because that's really where your artistry comes in. That's where your participation comes in. That's where you have your chance to be like, this is my take on the character, you know? It's your art, and having those opportunities is awesome. And so to be able to look at my background and say, oh, I've done all these different kinds of characters is something I'm very, you know, proud of, and has really taught me a lot.
So I have two listener questions, very, very different ones. But one wants to know is, I'm an aspiring voice actress, and I just want to know, what are some tips or some exercises one can do to help manage the speed of one's voice, which is important for dubbing and for advertising, so that you can make sure you have it fast enough or slow enough and understandable enough for the speed that they need?
Oh, that's a great and very specific question, in terms of like I'm starting out. Usually it's like, I'm starting out. Any tips in general? How specific, how wonderful. So speed, the first answer is reading aloud. You just have to, if it's on your phone or if it's just on your computer, if it just get used to reading aloud, which can be, you can read something from the newspaper, you can read poetry, you can read comic books, you can just read a book, like whatever it is, just reading out loud and, learning how to kind of relax inside of that. So sometimes when we first start, we're like, and if you have a lot of tension, you're not going to have a lot of control over your voice, especially your speed. So the first thing is just reading aloud, and you can read aloud different types of materials and then really put it on yourself to be like, okay, I'm going to try this idea, and then you do it, and then you listen back. Okay, now I'm going to try this, and you do it, and you listen back. And I think that starts to develop this muscle inside of you that is, when I intend something, I deliver. Because sometimes at first it'll be like, I'm going to do this like a really super happy little kid. And then you listen back to it, you're like, oh, she didn't sound happy at all, you know? And you start to develop a sense of like what feels like one thing inside of you, how it actually comes out outside of you, and getting those two things to match up. But specifically for speed, there's two sort of techniques, and actually these came from improv classes. I think the best way to be a good voice actor is to be a good actor, is first of all. But in this improv class, there's two things that you can do. One of them is lengthening the vowels, as if you like pick a point across the room or, you know, the table, like whatever distance you want it to be, and you can play with different distances. And you talk until you send the words to that point. And it can be closer. I am just going to send to this place right here. And these are ways to sort of get in tune with the living on the vowels, being on the vowels, sending them a distance, getting used to like warming up your voice, getting used to your voice. So a lot of vocal exercises, any kinds of vocal exercises will all help you develop a better relationship with your voice, and then the flexibility you can then use. So, but specifically for speed, you can do things where you're like tossing the word across the room, pulling on those vowels. That'll help you, especially that one. If it's the further away it is, helps you stretch and pull, and will help you more when you need to be able to slow down, because it's just going to stretch out your voice. It's going to sort of give you that elasticity. And then there's like, so there's a whole slew of exercises that are kind of this category of exercises. Most of them that I've encountered have come from either singing techniques, or improv techniques. And then it's just practicing. It's just practicing. I think that it's harder. I think that it's more important to try and be able to slow down in a way that's relaxed and comfortable. And if you can really get that in a nice relaxed place, then it'll be easy to be able to speed up without creating a lot of tension to get in the way. Because if you're having trouble speaking faster, it's usually because you just have too much tension, and so you can't quite get your mouth around the things, and you know what I mean? There's just too much tension in your jaw or your throat or your tongue or your face or your shoulders, or your breath control is off, that you just can't quite get around everything fast enough. And so if you kind of work backwards, counterintuitively, and start really pulling on and learning how to, in a very relaxed way, sustaining those vowels, relaxing your jaw, relaxing your throat, relaxing your tongue, because the more tension you have, the more prone you're going to be to injury, and the more difficulty you'll have kind of like getting your mouth around things.
Fantastic. And I know Zach here has a question about tension. Here's a little internet trouble. Let's see if he's still here. Zach, are you able to ask now?
Yes. What about for like extended sessions? Are there any tips for maybe managing it and making sure it doesn't get the better of you towards the end?
Well, most of the time you won't have more than 4 hours. I mean, it's pretty standard that like the longest session you'll have is 4 hours. If you need to do more than 4 hours in a day, then it'll usually be like, we'll do 3 hours and then give you a 2-hour lunch break and then come back or whatever. But for screaming, for yelling, screaming, fighting kinds of sounds, there's very little ways to sort of get around that if there's a lot of that kind of stuff happening. Oftentimes, if we can, like when I used to produce, we would schedule people and basically jump around. We would like do the first 3 hours in a row of whatever's happening, and then we jump to battle stuff. Or like when I'm recording video games, usually we record for a certain amount of time, and then we'll jump into the battle script, and we'll just do like 40 minutes of that or half hour of that, so that you're kind of breaking it up over time. But I think that really staying high, I think a lot of it is not even just what's happening in that session. A lot of it is what is your habit in general in your life. And so there's things like you have to stay hydrated. You have to give your body the chance to support itself as best can. So that means sleeping. That means staying hydrated. That means having exercise, like even if it's just going for a walk, like having exercise, having breath support. But the thing that's really going to help you in the moment of the session is it's always, always, always breath support. If you're talking on your vocal folds, if you're doing vocal fry, you can't sustain, like the body's just not built to do that for long periods of time. Your vocal folds are just not built for that. They are most efficient when they are taut and they are supported and the breath isn't just like pouring and pushing through them. Because if that's the situation, they're just going to get raw. That's just the way that it works. Mucus will happen because it's a way for them to protect themselves. So really, really, really what it comes down to is like proper breath support. Because and that's like the rib cage. That's the rib cage being able to hold your lungs open so that they can have the support and you're not collapsing every single time and pushing out too much breath. Because those are the things that's going to affect you. Now, when you're yelling, you're doing battle stuff, the way that we make those sounds is to push out a lot of extra breath and whatnot. So you try to keep those, minimized per session. But if your basic habits in life are, you don't have core strength, you're not having breath support, you have a lot of tension in your jaw or your tongue or your throat or your shoulders, then like all those things are already not in place to support you once the moment comes to be in the booth for 4 hours. And there's some people, I've seen so many people who are new and young, they get sick a lot. They get sick and they get hurt a lot when they're first trying to do, and they have to cancel sessions because they have not been. This is why I feel like voice acting, there's so many people who think, oh, I can voice act because I can talk. And that's not the case. Like if you haven't done the basics of like how to, like your body is an instrument and how to take care of that instrument, then you're going to have a lot of problems when you start stepping into that booth. And if you are lucky enough to book a lot right out of the gate and you don't have those foundations, like you're going to run into some trouble. You're going to run into problems because even if you're not yelling, you just don't know how to support your voice to talk for 4 hours. Because even though we all talk all day, you know what I mean? I'm talking, you're talking, we're all talk, you know what I mean? We're like, we can talk. But how many people, regular people, talk almost nonstop for 2, 3, 4 hours straight? We don't. That's just not normal. Like who does that in their life? Maybe possibly people who work customer service on phones because their job is just to talk to people constantly. But other than that, like who talks all day long?
Yeah.
So you have to, you don't think it's going to be a problem. You don't think it's going to be a big deal. You're like, it's talking. I talk. Humans talk. We talk. We're talkers. But it's a completely different thing when you get into that booth. And if you don't have some training, some support, and that's why even something like basic exercise, walking, because that's going to help it's going to help your lungs. It's going to help your intercostal muscles. It's going to help your diaphragm. Your legs. You're going to be standing for a really long time recording. Or if you sit down, you're like, oh, well, if I get tired, I can sit. Okay, great. But if you're going to sit, do you know how to continue to have breath support and support your diaphragm and not collapse your diaphragm and your lungs while you're in a seated position? Because most people, when they have bad posture. And so now you're actually going to exacerbate the thing because now you're sitting because you're tired because your legs you couldn't stand. But now you don't know how to sit in a way that supports your breathing apparatus. So now you're crushing your breathing apparatus. You're pushing more air through your vocal folds, and now you're going to have more problems. So it feels like it's not a full body experience, but more than any other form, it's a full body experience.
That's an awesome answer.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So the other listener, I have 2 more questions, and we'll see if Zach has any more, so we can start wrapping this up. If you hear a noise, it's my toddler. He's up from nap. With a puzzle game. So the question is this from a listener. They said, you were able to work on the J.J. Abrams show Fringe. And yes. The question is, what was your reaction in 2012 or 2013 when it was announced that J.J. Abrams was going to direct Star Wars? Having actually worked on a show of his, whether you met him or not, what was your initial reaction to J.J. Abrams plus Star Wars?
Oh, I mean, I think I was the same. I mean, not working on Fringe, I was the same as everyone else, being like, yes. I think that there are a lot of people in America who were very worried about the state of the future of that franchise after perhaps some movies may have been slightly disappointing to people who had been long-term fans. Is that the most political way I could say that?
Yes, that's a good political way to say that.
So I think to have someone like J.J. Abrams take the helm of something that people who are a fan are such fans of, and we really felt like we wanted something very precious and wonderful, and perhaps we had been disappointed in the past. I think we all were really excited and hopeful about it being awesome. And I think I was definitely in that camp. And growing up watching like sci-fi and we watched Star Trek and Star Wars, and, my dad, like me, my brother, and my sister to the Star Trek movies. And, I think anytime I get to be a part of that world and that genre, because I'm not sure that I I think of myself as really being suited for that genre in general, like in a live action way. I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I'm like, oh, I just meet so many other people who are like, they have such an interesting look, or they have like a fan. And I just feel like there's something very kind of like just normal and pedestrian about me that the fact that I even got a chance to be in a show of that genre, because Fringe specifically was kind of this, it took place in a very real reality, kind of pedestrian, Law and Order kind of looking world, where yet fantastical things were happening. So I feel like that was like the kind of, you know, if I was going to be able to book a sci-fi, you know, kind of show, then that was like the best show, my best opportunity to be in that world. So the fact that I even got to live in that world at all in a live action way was just really awesome. So, yeah, but when we found out that when that got announced, I think we all just did like, just flips inside our little children brains were just like losing their minds.
So, just a quick follow up to that, then, being a voice actor, I know most voice actors I know also do theater and so on. So was the transition to doing live stuff like Fringe just a natural extension to what you already do in the booth, or did you have to kind of adjust your thinking, since when you're filming, of course, there's slightly different process?
Well, you know, I mean, it's an interesting thing that, like, and that's the great thing again about the variety of working over different mediums is you get to sort of like flex different muscles, and they're all kind of a different experience. I would say that probably the biggest difference between doing live action and animation in general is the level of imagination that has to happen. For live action, there's so much that's like, by nature, the fact that it's being captured all in real time right there, you have everything in front of you. You know, you're walking a dog, the dog's really there. You're talking to a person, the person's really there. You know, so your imagination is all, you know, the emotional life that you're doing, that is your work to be that character in that moment, you know, delivering the scene. So it's still present and it's still there, but you're interacting with things that are like live and real and spontaneous, because you don't know what the dog is going to do. You don't know what that person's going to do. And so that's kind of a little bit different world in terms of the relationship between spontaneity and imagination. When you're doing an animation, you know, and I think like prelay versus dub is like a little bit different, but a lot of times in like a dub, a lot has already been set down. You have what's happening in front of you, and you know the sort of parameters and how they're talking and whatnot. But you have to imagine the whole physical life. You have to be the voice inside of that physical life. That is, this person's like running, they're in a field, it's cold out, they're angry, it's hot out, they're in class, they're not in class, like whatever their physical circumstances are, you have to imagine that, because you're standing in a booth with carpet and like padded walls with like a set of headphones on your head. But that's not the physical reality of that character that you're performing. You're supposed to be in armor in the 15th century wielding a sword. You're like, I have a pen. I have like a big pen in my hand. That's not a sword. That's not the weight of a sword. So the way that you have to bring your imagination to help fill out the physical reality to be able to deliver what's happening is different in animation than it is in live action. Because if I have a sword and I'm in the 15th century and I'm wearing armor, all those things are actually happening. I'm in armor. I have a sword in my hand. I'm standing in a field, you know, so a lot of those things are already present. So I think that that's really the key. And I think that you can hear the difference. Like in an animation, you can hear when someone's got the effort of like, they just finished running, or they're someplace and they're really cold, or they're, you know, it's a creepy situation and you can tell that they're like wary about the fact that they're in there's a difference between like, guys, I don't think this is a good idea. And like, guys, I don't think this is a good idea. You know what I mean? You're like, well, is someone really present in a spooky situation, or is someone just being like, I'm sounding scared? You know what I mean? You have to like really find a way to imbue all of that into your body, into a physical experience, so that the voice naturally carries that meaning. Because you can hear every thought in the voice. You can hear every thought the person has. And if they're not having the thought, you can hear the absence of that thought. So I think that's like the difference, is really like how you have to utilize the imagination.
That makes a lot of sense. So the last listener question is about video games. This person wants to know, you've worked in video games, and one of the newest ways of performing in video games is using motion capture. And they want to know, have you ever been able to use motion capture in any of your video game roles or any of your roles? And if so, what is the difference in a performance when you with all the balls on your face, and how awkward is that leotard?
So for me, yes, it's amazing how the technology has advanced so much that you can actually capture production quality audio while doing motion capture. For me personally, I've only done facial capture. So I've only I've been in a booth and they've done facial capture for the face part, but I've never had to be on a stage with the leotard, like the bodysuit on. So, I mean, like anything else, it's a little bit awkward at first. You're very kind of aware of stuff like on your face, and you suddenly become like really aware of what your face is doing. You know, you're like, oh my gosh, is that moving? Is that moving? In a way that you're like, it's like when you're talking all your life, right? And your voice sounds like in your head, but then you like leave a message on someone's phone and they play it back to you and you're like, oh my gosh, is that what I sound like out in the world? You know, and you're suddenly aware of yourself in a different way. So it definitely brings an awareness of, you're like, I had no idea my eyebrow moved like that when I had that emotion. But again, I think that it's something that normalizes very quickly. Like our body, we're so adaptable as human beings. Like we really do adapt to whatever situation we're in. It's a beautiful thing about our brain. And so you can very quickly like settle in and adapt to it. And just, again, like your focus starts to go on the work and what you're doing and what's happening. And then that becomes your situation. I think the only time where it's been anything like that has been tricky for me is, there was something I was doing where they needed some sort of effect, and they gave me a big, you know, those huge containers that like mixed nuts come in, like at Costco or something, and have a big screw on top, you know, and it's like a big plastic pour out container. Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay. I'm like, am I on my own here, guys? So it was like a big container like that, and I had to talk into the container because there was something about the echo of the voice that we needed to capture in the live audio, in the recording. And that was challenging because having my mouth in there and I started to like breathe in my own exhale. And after a while, you realize that you're running out of oxygen because you sucked out all the oxygen and you're only exhaling. And you're like, wait, you're like, and you need to like kind of take your mouth out and like breathe the air in the booth again. So that's the only time that I've really, and you literally have to keep taking breaks to like breathe fresh air. That surprised me because I was like, I can't believe how fast I ran out of oxygen in this thing. But that was the only thing that that was like something that had to be continually managed throughout the recording. But other stuff like that, like you just get kind of used to. And even if it's like, oh, you're wearing a weird rig, you're like, well, this is kind of strange. You're like, okay, well, now I'm used to it, because your focus just ends up going someplace else. Your focus is now on the scene, on the character, on the relationships, on the emotions, on what's happening. And you kind of start to your brain just sort of assimilates that, you know, in the background. It's like, whatever. Okay. I guess if you didn't, that'd be a miserable situation.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I can't imagine having all those things on my face. I guess having every movement of my face just measured and recorded is... it'll take a while to get used to. Plus, you have to learn how to move muscles that you aren't necessarily used to moving all the time.
Well, not necessarily, because it's the opposite, right? The whole reason that they're doing the facial capture is to capture what naturally happens when you have that emotion.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Because this is what, this is the study that they've done. My battery's about to die. Hold on a second. Studies that they've done that say like across different cultures, we all make the same movements when we're sad. Our faces respond the same way when we're sad, when we're happy, when we're angry. Like these all play out the same human beings. Now, what can make someone angry or sad or embarrassed can be culturally different or individually different. But when we're angry, we all look the same way. The same muscles get activated. So the reason they do, and then, Pixar really used this research in their movies, which is why their animation was just so mind-blowing, and so quote unquote real. So when you're doing facial capture in motion capture, the whole reason you're doing it is so that you get that natural thing that, like, when you're disgusted, your nose scrunches up, but you as the actor are just having the emotion and the face is happening and it's getting captured. Okay. And it's not really necessarily. Now, granted, there may be times where you have to work the technique backwards and be like, we need you to be angry. But that's why, again, it goes back to acting. You as the actor, as the artist, knowing your instrument and knowing your body, you need to know how to the behavior of anger and how to call that up, how to be angry when you need to be angry. Because when you're recording it, unless you're doing a play that starts the beginning and just travels straight through, everything else you do, movies, films, shorts, animation, games, everything else, you're going to be dropped into a moment. You don't get all the moments leading up to that moment. You're like, hey, this is what's going down. By the time you speak, you might be a third into the scene and all this stuff has happened and it has to be part of your reality, but you didn't have a chance to experience it. You just have to be there already. So that's why you have to know your instrument to be able to be like, all right, I'm there. I can do that. I can step into sadness. I can relate. I know how to activate this emotionality inside of me in a way that's truthful.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So we're just about out of time, so we're just going to wrap this up. Last question from us. Is there anything you'd like to, we know many of voice actors have appearances, have projects coming out. January is a big time for stuff to come out, and things they like to promote. Anything you'd like to promote or tell the fans, for this being our Christmas episode, that we have not talked about yet that you'd like them to all know about?
Anything coming up, I actually can't say because they haven't been announced yet. So in terms of projects that will be released in 2017, stay tuned. I am starting to try and build more content on my YouTube channel. So you can join me there. It's just Carrie Keranen, CarrieKeranen. I have a couple of things that are going to be going up over there for the coming year. And, I guess appearances right now, the only thing that's been announced is I'll be at Shudokan in Michigan in March. And then everything else is sort of not yet, is to be determined. But yeah, I guess I would just say happy holidays to everyone. And I hope everyone's has a great holiday and a happy new year, and that 2017 is looking bright and hopeful for us all.
I hope so too. So thank you so much for being on. Thank you for your stories and your enthusiasm for Star Wars. I haven't seen Rogue One yet. I'll be seeing it Tuesday is when I have my ticket, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna have to avoid the internet for 5 days.
Yeah. With little kids, it's harder to go out to a movie than it is when I'm just on myself, or else I'd probably be there right now in line.
Right.
but Tuesday, and I'm looking forward to it a lot. And I'm glad. I love your enthusiasm. I mean, even when it's Star Wars Battlefront, where a lot of the stuff is Red Leader coming in, or screaming, opening fire. I love your enthusiasm for the franchise, and it's
oh my gosh, yes, I mean, honestly, I have a great job. I have a beautiful life. I'm just so grateful. And I just sometimes wish I could go back to the 12, 13-year-old version of me and be like, it's going to be okay. Trust me, it's going to be okay. But I think we all feel that way, right?
Yeah. If someone says they don't, they're probably lying or they don't know.
Yeah, be like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Thank you so much for your time. And I will definitely send this to you as soon as it's up. Thank you for all the work you've done and the great voice you give us all the time. I look forward to hearing a lot more of your work in the near and distant future.
Yes, me too.
Thank you so much. And
I thank you.
Have a Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
And Kwanzaa, everything. Happy holidays.
Everything. Happy everything. Happy everything. I think Hanukkah is right on top of Christmas this year. They're right.
That's convenient.
Same time.
That's very convenient for everyone. So awesome. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Bye.